Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. According to Kremlin, next trilateral talks on Ukraine are going to take place in Abu Dhabi on 4th and 5th of February. Gaza's key Rafah border crossing has reopened for limited traffic after 2 years of closure. And Iran's supreme leader warns any U.S. attack would spark a regional war. The Kremlin says the next round of U.S.-brokered trilateral talks involving Russia and Ukraine will take place in Abu Dhabi from February 4th to 5th. The announcement came after earlier plans for February 1st were postponed due to scheduling issues. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the sides have narrowed differences on some matters, but have made less progress on more complex issues. He described the negotiations as difficult while noting that Moscow has received generally positive assessments of recent Russia-US discussions in Miami, which were described as productive overall. A Russian drone attack has killed at least 12 people in southeastern Ukraine after a bus carrying mine workers was hit in the Dnipropetrovsk region on Sunday. Ukrainian officials say the strike comes as Russian attacks continue despite claims of a pause on energy infrastructure targets.
At least 12 people have been killed after a Russian drone struck a bus in Ukraine's southeastern Dnipropetrovsk region. Footage shows the burned-out vehicle with its windows shattered. 7 others were injured. In his nightly address, President Volodymyr Zelensky offered his condolences to the families.
There was a strike by Russian drones on a regular coach carrying miners. Unfortunately, there are many dead. My condolences to all relatives and friends.
Ukraine's energy minister described the strike as a cynical and targeted attack on energy sector workers. Energy company DTEK confirmed all the victims were its employees returning from underground operations. The attack comes as Ukraine's energy system remains under severe strain this winter, following months of Russian strikes on power and heating infrastructure. Kyiv says Russian attacks have continued despite Moscow's claim that it agreed to pause strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Earlier the same day, Ukrainian officials also reported injuries after strikes hit a maternity hospital and residential buildings in the city of Zaporizhzhia. US-brokered talks between Ukraine and Russia are scheduled to take place on the 4th and 5th of February in the United Arab Emirates.
Gaza's key Rafah border crossing has reopened for limited traffic after more than 2 years of closure, officials have said. This has been welcomed by Palestinians who hope for aid flow into the enclave.
Gaza's main border crossing at Rafah has resumed limited travel following months of near-total closure. Israeli officials said the crossing, which links Gaza with Egypt, has opened in both directions for residents travelling on foot only. Before the war in Gaza, Rafah was the enclave's primary exit point and a key entry route for humanitarian aid. It has been largely closed since May 2024. Palestinians in Gaza welcome the move, with some hoping it will allow more aid to enter, while others are waiting to leave the enclave for medical treatment abroad.
We are happy about the opening of the Rafah crossing, and God willing, it will open more so that everything we had lacking during the war can enter. We need more support in gas, food supplies, flour, medical syringes and everything. Tents, blankets, mattresses, everything. Thank God we hope it opens even more and remains open, so we can forget the atmosphere of war that we still have not recovered from.
The opening of the Rafah crossing is also good news for us, because there is no treatment for children here, and nothing is available in the hospital. No equipment, no medicines, nothing is available in the hospital. Even my son's medication is not available in Gaza.
According to a Palestinian source, 50 Palestinians were expected to enter Gaza on the first day, where they will undergo stringent Israeli security checks, while a similar number would be allowed to leave. Gazan patients and family members gathered outside the Red Crescent Hospital in Khan Yunis in preparation for departure.
It feels like a dream, especially for my father. We had lost hope of him receiving treatment. Then they suddenly called us and told him to come to receive treatment and travel. This mechanism is a dream.
Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have registered with the World Health Organization to travel for treatment. Gaza's health ministry said at least 20,000 patients, including children and cancer patients, are awaiting evacuation.
New disclosures in the Epstein case are creating fresh political shockwaves in Britain, with Keir Starmer facing renewed scrutiny over links involving Prince Andrew and a senior Labour figure. Our Zainab Farizadeh has the details.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says King Charles' brother Prince Andrew should be prepared to testify before a US congressional committee, following new revelations about Andrew's links to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer said anyone with information should be ready to share it, whatever form they are asked, adding that victims must be placed at the center of any process. The comments come after the US Justice Department released new files linked to Epstein, including emails suggesting Andrew remained in contact with him for more than 2 years after Epstein's conviction. The documents include exchanges discussing possible meetings and business-related contacts. In several emails, Epstein referred to women he proposed introducing to the prince. US lawmakers investigating the Epstein case have renewed calls for Andrew to answer questions. The disclosures have also prompted political fallout in Britain. Former government minister Peter Mandelson has resigned from Prime Minister Starmer's Labour Party, saying he did not want to cause further embarrassment because of his past connections to Epstein. British media, citing the Justice Department files, reported allegations that Epstein made payments to Mandelson in 2003 and 2004. Claims Mandelson has said are false and that he will investigate. Mandelson was dismissed as Britain's ambassador to the United States last year, following earlier scrutiny over his relationship with Epstein. On Friday, the US Justice Department released around 3 million pages, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This is the largest release so far, following a law passed last year requiring the documents to be made public. The files include emails between Epstein and a number of high-profile figures. Slovakia's Prime Minister National Security Advisor Miroslav Lajčák was also named. He resigned after new files show that he and Epstein exchanged messages discussing women. He denies any wrongdoing. Some of the documents mention prominent figures, including President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and billionaire Elon Musk. The identity of French President Emmanuel Macron had also drawn attention. His name appears in several documents from before and after his election in 2017. The record suggests Epstein claimed that Macron sought his help on various matters. The French presidency has not commented on the documents. The latest release comes 6 weeks after the Justice Department missed a deadline set by a law signed by President Trump, which required all Epstein-related documents to be made public. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Sunday that Washington is in talks with Cuba's leadership to reach a deal. His comments come just days after he threatened Cuba's struggling economy with what he described as a virtual oil blockade.
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba, to see what happens. I want the people that came here that were horribly treated by Cuba to be taken care of, to be able to go back and do what they have to do. You know, they have their family there. They haven't been able to see them in years, many, many years. So I think we're going to make a deal with Cuba.
President Trump, back to Brexit.
It's in bad shape. Cuba's in bad shape. Cuba has a humanitarian problem.
China has executed 4 senior members of the Bai family criminal network, which operated out of northern Myanmar, for offenses including murder, telecom fraud and drug trafficking. State broadcaster CCTV reported on Monday. In November 2025, 5 leading figures in the group were sentenced to death. Bai Shousheng, one of those condemned, died following the initial verdict, while the remaining 4 were executed by a court in Shenzhen, Guangdong province, according to the Supreme Court. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Lin Jian, said that significant results have been achieved in tackling cross-border telecom and online fraud. China has begun its annual Lunar New Year travel season, with authorities preparing for unprecedented pressure on transport networks as the holiday period approaches. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more.
China's launched its Lunar New Year travel rush at a time of economic uncertainty, but demand is still surging. Authorities expect a record of 9.5 billion passenger trips during the 40-day period, held by a public holiday that has been extended to 9 days for the first time. Travelers began flooding transport hubs across China on Monday as the country kicked off its annual Spring Festival travel season. This year's Lunar New Year falls on February 17th, ushering in the Year of the Horse. The 40-day travel period will run until mid-March.
Why do I feel it's even more stressful than last year? My flight home was already sold out. If you don't buy early, prices can fluctuate a lot, and even double.
Major travel booking platforms report Lunar New Year reservations for 2026 are already higher than last year, despite pressure on household finances. Officials say the surge is being driven by the longer holiday and a full return to pre-pandemic travel patterns.
I think 2025 was pretty tough. I feel like I'm working harder than before, but the results are not as good.
Beyond family reunions, the Spring Festival travel rush is also a major test for China's transport system. Authorities say most journeys this year will be made by private car, while rail and air travel are also expected to hit record levels. The busiest travel day is forecast for February 13th, several days before the Lunar New Year, as pressure builds across transport network. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Gearing up for the 2026 Winter Olympics, athletes are beginning to settle into life at the Olympic Village in Milan, with competition just days away. Early arrivals say the atmosphere is positive as preparations step up ahead of the Milano Cortina Games.
Athletes from around the world have begun arriving at the Olympic Village in Milan as final preparations get underway for the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Games. The village, located in the heart of the city, will be home to around 1,700 athletes during the Games. It offers a full range of facilities designed to help competitors train, recover and relax, including a fully equipped gym, wellness areas, briefing rooms and even a dedicated gaming zone. Built on a former railway yard, the village is part of a major urban regeneration project. Organisers say sustainability was a key focus, with plans already in place for the site to be converted into student housing once the Olympics conclude. Inside, athletes are settling into modern bedrooms and shared living spaces. A large canteen serves international cuisine, while lounges, bars and common areas provide opportunities to socialize. Wellness spaces, including a so-called mind zone, are available for mental preparation and recovery. Balconies and windows are now lined with national flags, adding to the growing Olympic atmosphere as teams arrive from across the globe. The Winter Games will be jointly hosted by Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo, one of Italy's most famous alpine resorts, and will run from February 6th to 22nd. Early arrivals say the mood inside the village is upbeat, as athletes begin to settle in and turn their focus toward competition.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a nice village. Everything is working. It's beautiful. Yeah, except the buildings around. But this is a good example for how it all can be. It's really nice. The food is good. The beds are good. We have enough space. So we are happy.
Time being on the Olympic Games, and really enjoy here. The atmosphere is really nice. The campus is also really just a fresh new one, renovated probably inside, and yeah, that's it. So we just get in. We are trying to accommodate everything step by step, and hope we're going to enjoy with everything together.
Yeah, sure, because it was during COVID, so now we're going to be, with all the crowd and the families are there, so it's going to be great.
With the opening ceremony just days away, attention now turns to competition as athletes make their final preparations.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the Ukraine peace talks as Kiev, Washington and Moscow prepare for trilateral negotiations in Abu Dhabi. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. We turn to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, where fresh diplomatic efforts are underway to end nearly 4 years of war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced a new round of trilateral talks between Ukraine, the United States and Russia in Abu Dhabi on February 4th to 5th to discuss a U.S. proposed 20-point peace plan that covers territorial issues, security guarantees and post-war reconstruction. These negotiations were delayed from earlier this week amid rising tensions between Washington and Tehran, a situation Kiev says has diverted U.S. attention. Ukraine says it is ready to engage substantively, but significant disagreements remain, particularly over territorial claims in eastern Ukraine and the scope of security guarantees Kiev requires. Joining us now is Anna Evans, political analyst who speaks to us from Lisbon, Portugal. Anna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So, Anna, what are the key elements of the U.S.-backed 20-point peace plan, and why is it central to these talks?
Well, the U.S. perspective has been very important. So the special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has been playing a significant role in forming the 20-point plan for a mediated peace. And this plan is set on an ensemble of pillars, and these pillars have to do with territorial concessions, with the issue of military limits, meaning how many Ukrainian men can, or international forces there can be on Ukrainian ground. Territorial concessions meaning will there be a de facto line according to what Russia has so far achieved, and which principal areas of Donbass and Kherson will be involved in this line, in this frozen line, and security guarantees. For example, will there be a kind of an Article 5 clause that resembles NATO's security guarantees, but without an actual NATO membership plan for Ukraine, which Russia does not at all accept, and also issues of recognition of sovereignty. Who is sovereign over what? And of course, the sovereignty issue is always inevitably entangled with the territorial issue. So if there is a de facto line that is accepted according to Russian gains so far, will there be a sovereign over those lands? Or what kind of model will there be? Because one can assume that there can be a model like it exists in Korea, that is a de facto standing, line with military on both sides, but not sovereignty actually defined. So it's like a frozen line. And, very importantly, which kinds of foreign forces will be allowed, in Ukraine? Will European military forces will be allowed as peacekeepers? Or will it need to be non-European and non-Americans because Russia does not agree to either Europe or US forces on the ground? President Putin says that for him, having, an international cap doesn't mean anything if in reality there are NATO forces on the ground.
Anna, reports suggest the Abu Dhabi talks were postponed due to U.S. focus on tensions with Iran. How might Middle East geopolitics affect this peace process?
Well, the Middle East is always a crucial pillar of geopolitics. It has always been. And so we need to remember that Iran is a major ally of Russia, and there is, these alignment of interests between China, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and other BRICS countries. And so, developing countries. And so if there is trouble in Iran, what we know is that either Russia's negotiations can be used as a bait with regard to Iranian negotiations, or vice versa. Iran can be used as a bait in negotiations with Russia on the Ukrainian issue. So one way or the other, the fact that there are troubles with Iran will unbalance the equilibrium that exists within current negotiations. Furthermore, if there is any sort of military intervention regarding Iran, Russia, as an ally of Iran, will need, to align and provide extra military support. And so in different terms, both in diplomatic negotiation, in the balance of regional powers, in using each of these compartmentalized subjects as a bait to the other, either Russia for Iran or Iran for Russia, all these unbalances the negotiations. And so, Russia can try to make a profit on the Iran issue, but, but Iran can also try to make a profit using the Russian issue. And so it is not good news, when compartmentalized problems intercept each other. And that's the major preoccupation at this stage. And so it makes sense that the trilateral negotiations were a bit delayed, to try and see if the situation in Iran stabilizes.
Anna, territorial disputes, especially over Donbass, remain contentious. What scenarios could lead to compromise, if any?
Well, there are different models, as I explained at the beginning of our talk. And so one can create a frozen line that, establishes de facto jurisdiction, but not real sovereignty. And so one can postpone the problems of sovereignty for a later stage. And so, for example, President Zelensky is arguing that any territorial concession will need to be submitted to referendum so that the population can have its say and its will on any concession. And of course, this is a way to create a de facto situation that it is not formally regulated, so that the president, in this case Ukraine's president, does not put his legitimacy on, at stake by doing territorial concessions. So one of the typical mechanisms in these cases, which of course we also saw in Gaza, for example, very recently, in the trilateral meetings also that were held in Gaza, one of the typical mechanisms of these very complex negotiations is to, leave very technical details that are really hard to solve for a later stage. And so, allow the territory as a free economic zone or as a zone that is patrolled by international forces and that is subject to a de facto line of separation between Russian and Ukraine and international forces. However, a line that does not mean at all formal recognition of sovereignty, so that the problem does not fall on President Zelensky's head, because as a political leader, he needs to justify to his population, any sort of territorial concession, in the same way that President Trump will need to justify to his population why he has had already more than 1 million casualties, and yet, Russia would go away without sufficient concessions. So this is such a complex problem that the usual way to deal with it is not to deal with it and just allow some de facto model that really does not solve the problem on the short run, and but allows not to have active war and to have a tenable situation on the ground. Of course, we know Zaporizhia, the nuclear power station, is one of the great disputes in all this. And energy, of course, is also one of the great disputes in all this, because Russia has been attacking Ukraine in terms of its energy facilities. There is dramatic cold at this point in the country. People do not have energy. And this, of course, has a very high political cost for the civil population and for the country's president as well. So the energy issue is also related to the territorial dispute and, to how much a country can withstand this kind of wearing and tearing down war.
Anna, if the Abu Dhabi talks fail to produce a breakthrough, what diplomatic or strategic options remain for Kiev and Washington?
Well, we know for a fact that talks remain and keep going. So throughout all this process, which is so unfortunately long, these 4 years of war, all throughout this process, there have been so many rounds of talks. We remember from the beginning, for example, in Turkey, the initial talks. So there will be certainly other talks. Now, the problem is that ever since the very early stages of negotiations, unfortunately, the great problems remain the same. In a negotiation, you have like two separate circumferences which do not overlap. And the problem is that we need an overlap. We need the circumferences to have a common area, common ground that people can agree on both sides. And the problem is that throughout these 4 years, we have never reached the overlapping circle, where Russian maximalist requests become minimalist, and where Ukraine's, sovereignty requests do concessions so that they meet somewhere, not midway, but somewhere on the way. And so far, this has not happened, notwithstanding many, many rounds of negotiations and different players in the negotiations. So we've had Turkey, now we have Abu Dhabi, later we might have China. There might be different mediators, but the real problems, unfortunately, have remained basically in essence similar since the very start of negotiations.
Anna Evans, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise. We appreciate your insights on these critical developments. Thanks a lot.
A pleasure. A pleasure.
Thanks. Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to A-News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has warned that any attack on the country could spark a regional conflict. It comes after President Donald Trump sent military forces to the Middle East. Meanwhile, the European Union has designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, prompting Tehran to respond with threats against the armed forces of all EU member states.
Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says that any attack on the country could trigger a regional conflict, Iran also announced it is in a state of full military readiness. Deputy Commander of the IRGC, Ahmad Vahidi, says the armed forces are better prepared than during the 12-day conflict in June and that all potential enemy movements are being closely monitored. The comments made on Sunday comes after the US announced it had deployed aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln to the region, with Central Command confirming its operations in the Arabian Sea. However, Iran's supreme leader says Tehran won't be intimidated.
The Americans have threatened us repeatedly in the past, saying all options are on the table, which includes the option of war. They've always said these things. Similarly, this person, Donald Trump, constantly claims they've brought warships. But the Iranian nation shall not be intimidated by these things. The Iranian people will not be stirred by these threats.
US President Donald Trump dismissed warnings of a potential regional conflict.
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
On Friday, senior US and Israeli military officials held a closed-door meeting at the Pentagon, while Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz met Zamir to review operational readiness. Last week, the EU designated Iran's IRGC as a terrorist organization and imposed sanctions on 15 officials and 6 entities covering 247 individuals and 50 organizations. In response, Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said Tehran would treat the armed forces of all EU member states as terrorist groups, with the consequences shared collectively.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran and Washington are at a fateful juncture, hopeful of a fair and equitable deal, while Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that a U.S. invasion will spill over to a regional conflict.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi said he was hopeful of a fair and equitable agreement with the United States, as both sides are at a fateful point in time. He made the comment in a post on X social platform on Sunday, after Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei warned that if US starts a war with Iran, it will be a regional war. Ayatollah Khamenei's statement was also made on Sunday in an address to mark the 47th anniversary of the victory of the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. Araghchi referred to his interview with CNN TV channel over the weekend, in which he said a fair and equitable agreement was achievable to ensure no nuclear weapons and in a short period of time. However, he cautioned that there may also be miscalculation and aggression, saying that Iran is equally prepared for that scenario. Meantime, Iran's head of Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, signaled progress on a framework for negotiations between Tehran and Washington. In a post on his X account, after visiting Moscow last week, he wrote that, contrary to the artificially manufactured media war narrative, the formation of a framework for negotiations is progressing. In the latest bid to avert a military standoff with US, Foreign Minister Araghchi held phone talks with his Egyptian, Turkish, and Saudi counterparts. According to official sources on Monday, quoting the Foreign Ministry, they discussed latest regional developments amid rising tensions between Tehran and Washington. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Turkey is emerging as a key diplomatic hub as efforts intensify to defuse mounting tensions between the United States and Iran. Ankara is reportedly at the center of a new initiative, also involving Egypt and Qatar, aimed at bringing Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table.
Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are trying to organize a meeting this week in Ankara between White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and senior Iranian officials, according to sources cited in Turkish media. The reported diplomatic push comes amid a major U.S. military buildup in the region, raising fears of an imminent U.S. attack on Iran. On Saturday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian spoke by phone with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to discuss possible diplomatic solutions to the crisis. A day earlier, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Istanbul for talks with his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan on ways to avert a wider regional conflict. At a joint press conference, Fidan said Ankara was ready to support a diplomatic solution while stressing Turkey's opposition to any foreign military intervention in Iran. Fidan said negotiations between the United States and Iran should resume over Iran's nuclear program, after which other outstanding differences could be addressed. Araghchi said Tehran was prepared to resume nuclear talks with Washington, but rejected holding talks while under the threat of a U.S. military attack. He also said Iran's ballistic missile capacity would not be on the agenda of any talks. White House officials, meanwhile, say President Donald Trump has not made a final decision on military action and remains open to a diplomatic resolution. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Kazakhstan's Foreign Minister Yermak Köşerbayev have reaffirmed the growing strategic partnership between their countries during high-level talks in Ankara. Co-chairing the 8th meeting of the Joint Strategic Planning Group, Fidan welcomed the strong political dialogue and expanding cooperation in trade, investment, energy, transport, defense, education and culture. Both sides emphasized the goal of boosting trade to $15 billion, strengthening cooperation within the Organization of Turkic States, advancing the Trans-Caspian Middle Corridor and exchanging views on regional issues. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has arrived in the United Arab Emirates on a working visit. Azerbaijani leader was welcomed at Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport with an official guard of honor. President Aliyev was received by UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, underscoring the close ties between the two countries. Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is preparing for a state visit to Pakistan with trade, transit and regional connectivity expected to top the agenda. The talks come amid growing economic ties between the two countries and plans to expand transport routes linking Central and South Asia. Our correspondent Fariza Kalumurzina reports from Almaty.
Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is set to pay a state visit to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan on February 3rd and 4th in Islamabad. He is expected to hold talks with the country's leadership, focusing on the expansion of political and economic ties. The information was confirmed by the Kazakh Presidential Press Service. During the visit, President Tokayev will meet with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and President Asif Ali Zardazi. The agenda includes the development of political dialogue, the expansion of trade and economic cooperation, as well as collaboration in cultural and humanitarian fields. The President is also expected to take part in the Kazakhstan-Pakistan Business Forum. The visit comes amid preparations for a key document, the Transit Trade Agreement. The decision to finalize and sign the agreement was reached in late April 2025 during the Kazakhstan-Pakistan Intergovernmental Commission. Its official signing is planned as part of the visit. The agreement aims to simplify transport and logistics procedures, promote multimodal transportation, and support the development of international transport corridors. Special attention is being given to providing Kazakhstan with access to Pakistan's seaports, Karachi, Qasim, and Gwadar. These ports are seen as a strategic logistics gateway for Kazakhstan and as potential transit hubs for Central Asia, offering access to markets in the Gulf region, Africa, and Southeast Asia. At the same time, the sides are discussing large-scale infrastructure projects, including a railway line linking Turundi, Herat, Kandahar, and Spin Boldak with onward access to Pakistan. Afghanistan has stated its readiness to ensure transit for goods moving from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. Economic approachment is also reflected in trade figures. According to Kazakhstan's National Statistics Bureau, bilateral trade between Kazakhstan and Pakistan reached $101.3 million in January to November 2025, more than double the figure recorded a year earlier. And both sides have set a target of increasing annual trade to $1 billion a year. Fariza Kalumurzina, Almaty,
A News.
Afghanistan and Turkmenistan are signaling fresh momentum on major regional energy and transport projects following high-level talks in the western city of Herat. The focus is on pipelines, railways, electricity and new foreign investment. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has the details from Kabul.
The Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs of Afghanistan, Abdul Ghani Brother, has met Turkmenistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Rashid Mirdov in Herat, discussing a broad package of economic cooperation. According to a statement from the Deputy Prime Minister's office, talks covered trade and banking cooperation, alongside major regional projects including the TAPI and TAP pipelines, railway connectivity and electricity transmission. Brother announced that an Arab firm, Delta International Group, has expressed interest in investing in the TAPI gas pipeline project. He said the company is looking at purchasing gas under TAPI, expanding Turkmenistan's gas production capacity and constructing and extending the pipeline from Herat's Guzara district through Kandahar's Spin Boldak, with plans to extend it further to the Indian border. Brother also urged Turkmenistan to clarify its position on the Torghundi-Herat railway project, noting that Kazakhstan has already shown strong interest in implementing the line. He added that Afghanistan is fully prepared to finalize the roadmap for the TAP project. In response, Turkmenistan's foreign minister said his country is ready to invest in the Torghundi-Herat railway, confirming that practical work has already begun in Torghundi. He also stated that Turkmenistan's prepared to supply electricity to Afghanistan through 5 transmission routes and increase export capacity. The TAPI pipeline linking Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India has long been viewed as a cornerstone regional energy project, though security and financing challenges have delayed progress for years. Afghanistan sees both TAPI and expanded rail links as key to boosting transit revenues, regional trade and long-term economic stability. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Afghanistan-Turkmenistan talks on the TAPI gas pipeline and regional energy connectivity projects. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. In Herat, Afghanistan's Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs held high-level talks with Turkmenistan's Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, focusing on a major regional connectivity and energy projects that could reshape economic ties across Central and South Asia. At the heart of the discussions was progress on the ambitious Turkmenistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan-India gas pipeline, a strategic project designed to deliver Turkmen gas eastward, strengthen energy security, and unlock new economic corridors. Officials confirmed the recent construction advances on the Afghan section of the pipeline, with the goal of reaching Herat by the end of 2026, a milestone seen as key for regional integration and energy exports. The talks also covered the TAP electricity transmission project, aiming to boost power flows into underserved Afghan regions, as well as revival of the Torghundi-Herat railway link, where Turkmenistan has already begun practical work. To unpack the implications of these developments for Afghanistan's economy and the broader region, we're joined by Omar Samad, former Afghan ambassador to France and Canada, and government advisor, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Omar Samad, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Samad, what is the strategic significance of the TAPI pipeline for Afghanistan and the wider region, and what progress has been made so far?
Well, it's strategic in so many ways because not only is it a project that has been on the board for more than 30 years, since 1995. Mm-hmm. And for a variety of reasons, of course, it has not progressed, because especially of security reasons in Afghanistan over the years. But now we are seeing signs that it's happening. So regional economic integration is important. Selling resources, energy resources, connecting electricity, railroad, Central Asia to South Asia is absolutely a necessity. It's a need not only for the markets in India and Pakistan and also beyond Pakistan and India through ports on the Indian Ocean to the rest of the world. Turkmenistan and Central Asia offer so much resources that Afghanistan is geographically the best, shortest, and probably best suited for transporting energy and other goods from Central Asia to South Asia. And from that perspective, I think it's a strategic win-win situation for everyone.
Mr. Samad, but how realistic is the timeline for the Tapi gas pipeline segment to reach Herat by the end of 2026, and what challenges remain?
Well, if you look at the timelines in the past, you see that Turkmenistan started working on its portion of the pipeline around 2005, and it finished around 2010. It continued, and then by 2024-25, the Turkmenistan portion was finished, and the work started implementation in Afghanistan. So almost 90 kilometers is being prepared for laying the pipeline inside Afghanistan, which in my opinion is a big success story. The first phase, of course, has to go from the Turkmenistan border to Herat, and then from Herat to Kandahar. What happens beyond Kandahar and Spin Boldak is still being discussed between Pakistan and Turkmenistan, between Pakistan and Afghanistan, but more importantly between Pakistan and India, who have, as you know, cold relationship. So that's in the future. For now, I think that the implementation inside Afghanistan is feasible. I think that by the end of the year, we can see progress towards Herat. And if we reach Herat and security is assured, I think that it's going to be an open question of continuing the project towards Kandahar.
So can you explain the importance of the TAP electricity transmission project and how it could impact Afghanistan's energy supply?
So yes, so besides gas that is going to be transported across 800 kilometers of Afghan territory, there's also the project of electricity and railroads. I think that those two other elements are absolutely essential for Afghanistan's economy. Not only for Turkmenistan, that will be selling and transporting across Central Asia, but also the needs for economic recovery and economic work in Afghanistan is so much that electricity is going to be very important in terms of helping, and railroads are absolutely essential for trade and transit. And I think that this is not just the only route, but this is going to be a route that is not only going to connect Turkmenistan and Central Asia through Afghanistan to Pakistan and subcontinent, but if there's also a possibility of then rerouting this westward towards Iran. Of course, the geopolitics of the whole region matters. Peace and stability in the region matters. So as long as there is peace and stability, I think that there is feasibility for such projects to progress.
Also, the Turgan-Herat railway was highlighted as a priority. How would this rail link between regional trade and connectivity? And what role might Kazakhstan and other regional partners play in these infrastructure initiatives?
So, yes, the source is not just Turkmenistan. We can go further up north and we can see that Russia has an interest, Kazakhstan has an interest in all of this. Including countries like Kyrgyzstan. Then we have Uzbekistan and Tajikistan that also are working on projects with Afghanistan that have to do with rail and road linkages as well as energy transport. So what we are seeing is the emergence of several corridors of trade and transit as well as electricity and energy flowing from north, south, and then of course that opens the return route of goods and services being provided from the subcontinent towards Central Asia. So I think, again, this is a win-win for everyone. I hope that the geopolitics and the security conditions in the region will allow all of this to materialize.
So, Mr. Samad, what measures should be taken to ensure that Afghan citizens benefit directly from these projects through employment and local development?
Well, Afghanistan, as you know, is an isolated country. It's under sanctions. It is not receiving any foreign investment or aid. It's relying on its own resources for economic recovery. And so there is a lot of poverty. We know that poverty and unemployment in Afghanistan is very, very high. There's a need for humanitarian assistance. I think that any project, any investment in Afghanistan will help the Afghan people, but it has to be done in a judicious way, that everyone benefits and the economy overall benefits from any investment or any projects, infrastructure or otherwise, that is being implemented in Afghanistan, and especially in terms of creating jobs and livelihoods for the Afghan people.
And finally, looking ahead, what are the key policy or diplomatic steps required to maintain momentum and ensure these projects reach completion?
I think that the job of diplomats right now and leaders in the region is, first of all, to maintain stability and peace. Afghanistan was in a war conflict situation for many years. That is why this project has taken more than 30 years to materialize. Now that we have somewhat of a confidence building stability in Afghanistan, I think that we need to take advantage of this. At the same time, the job is to sustain whatever stability exists in order to make sure that other factors do not come into play and that the region can focus on the economics of its people and the livelihoods. I think that yes, there's competition, of course. There's competition between countries and between blocks of countries. But that competition needs to be turned into a positive win-win situation instead of trying to undermine each other in order to have a zero-sum game. I think the zero-sum game issues of the past have hurt us, and we need to stay away from that.
Omar Samad, thank you for sharing your expert analysis and helping our audience understand the broader implications of these developments. We appreciate your insights. Thanks a lot. That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.